you have to imagine I'm 25 years old at this point and have never had really close friends, never had people. I had connections, I had friendships, but never really had people that I was like, oh, they get me and I get them. And I have such a blast with them. And, they just accept me for who I am. And that started to happen.
Welcome to The Way of the Muse, a podcast for women who want to create richness in every area of their lives, from business and career to lifestyle, relationships, family, purpose, and fulfillment. I'm Gigi Sage.
And I'm Makena Sage. We're a mother-daughter coaching team, and combined, we've spent over 4 decades helping people create their best and most fully expressed lives. If you're ready to step into your bigger dreams with ease, fun, and flow, you're in the right place. Let's get into the episode.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Way of the Muse. I am Makena Sage, and this will be my last solo episode for a little while. I've been doing a little series here. Gigi's been traveling, and she will actually be on with you next week doing a couple of solo episodes of her own. So very excited for that. And I am going to share on a very different topic this week. We've been doing a little business series, which has been super fun, leading up to my Focus and Flow class, which I'm leading this weekend. And so as we're kind of wrapping up that chapter right now, I want to talk about something very different, which is finding friends. And specifically, I'm really going to share a lot about my personal story of overcoming insecurity, which I was very insecure when I was young, and navigating mean girl situations that were very, very challenging. And then ultimately, finally finding my people. And this is something that so many people that I talk to struggle with, and I have struggled with. And so I want to share my story to, let you know if there's something you relate to, that you're not alone in that. And then also to share some of what's really worked for me over the years and how I've been able to grow through certain situations and really find friends that share values and I feel deeply connected to. It's one of the richest parts of my life at this stage. So my relationship, absolutely. And of course, my business and my family, and then my friendships. So really it all comes down, I guess, to relationships. So I'm very blessed and I feel very rich in relationships. So just to start out, I'm a former homeschooled kid. So some of you may know that, some of you don't. I was homeschooled K through 12. So never went to school until college. And most of my siblings were homeschooled as well, but I was the only one that was all the way through because of where I fell in the lineup, so to speak. Some of my siblings went to school until a certain time and then were homeschooled. Some were homeschooled up until a certain time and then started going to school, but I was all the way through. And we traveled a lot during my childhood, which was a really incredible experience. We would do long-term travel for, 2-3 months at a time, often a couple times a year. And so in order to facilitate that, we were homeschooled and, it really allowed us to have these incredible cultural experiences and learn languages. And, my mom was leading her seminars all over the world. And so we were getting to know kids through the seminars because we would host kids camps. I mean, we wouldn't host them, but our parents would and our nanny at the time. And so I want to just kind of paint that picture because I had a very unconventional upbringing where a lot of kids are in school and they meet their friends that way. I didn't really have that. So, had some friends, of course, but I really had to figure out the friendship thing. And it wasn't just sort of there as, finding friends that I went to school with. Now, it's not to say everybody that goes to school makes great friends. I know that people struggle with all kinds of things with that. But I do want to share that I came to this from a kind of a unique place. And by the time I was in high school, we were a little more settled, and my younger 2 siblings started going to school. And so they decided they wanted to finish out and actually go to school. And so at that point, I was home alone a lot more before I had my siblings around all the time. And I really started to feel the need and the desire to have more consistent friendships. And at the same time, I was very insecure. I had a lot of insecurity because, again, homeschooled kid, living this unconventional lifestyle when I was around other people my age, I just felt like I didn't fit in. I didn't really understand the dynamics. And at the same time, I was an extrovert, though. I really love people. That's true to this day. And so I had these kind of two opposing forces. I had this deep insecurity and self-consciousness, but I also had this extroverted side that really wanted to get out with people and meet people and know people. And so I had to get creative. And for a while, I met people through my siblings' school. So I would get to know people in their class, and then through that, get to know people in other classes. And then I started getting invited here and there to parties or to gatherings and meeting some different people. So I had some good times in those days, enjoyed myself and made some friends. But at the same time, especially looking back, I definitely didn't feel like I found my people, so to speak. I still really felt like the odd one out. I didn't 100% relate, or I just didn't feel like, some people just click with their friends when they're in school or whatever, and some people don't. And I was really in that category of, I didn't 100%, right? It was like great to have people to hang out with, but there was something where we didn't fully relate or resonate with each other. So fast forward to, I'm about 20 years old. I took a gap year in between high school and college, and then finally decided to go to a 4-year university in Rhode Island. I was living in Texas at the time, so I went to very cold Rhode Island and studied international business. And this was my first time ever in a school dynamic. So as you can imagine, and I was also a little bit older than some of the other kids that were attending. So it was a culture shock, not only because New England was a very different culture, but also because I hadn't dealt with those kinds of social dynamics. And so there were, everything from mean girl situations, and I use the word mean girls because a lot of people relate to that, but really it was just drama with other women, right? Where they didn't like me, or we didn't get along, or whatever it might be. And there were sort of cliquey dynamics, and I didn't really understand cliquey dynamics. So I was just very upfront and wanted to, say it like you mean it. And I had to really learn and experience that not everybody was that way. And I'm sure I made my fair share of mistakes. I'm definitely not saying I was an angel by any means. I was never malicious or anything like that. But I'm sure in terms of, I made plenty of faux pas and the social dynamics. But that was really challenging. I really struggled with that. And the other side was dating, really starting to date, which I didn't start to do until my late teens. And then getting into college, I was dating more. And then there was all the drama around that. If you had a breakup and just how to navigate that. And these are things that most people learn when they're younger, I would say. But for me, it was a much later experience, which in some ways I'm grateful for. I feel like I sort of delayed some of the trauma, so to speak. But I also, it was hard, to navigate that as an adult and figure those things out. So I struggled a lot in those years with the social aspect of things. I was doing really well academically and excelling in that side of things, but personally was having a much harder time. So again, made some friends, had some great times, but all in all, it was really challenging. So fast forward, I'm almost 24 when I graduate, and I end up moving out to San Diego, or actually to San Clemente, so a little bit north of San Diego, because I took a job for about 6 months out of college, and I was coming into the office, which was based in Southern California, to kind of train, and then I was virtual. So I was living kind of part-time in Southern California, and I met a guy and ended up moving down to San Diego by the end of that year. And at first, I was super isolated. I didn't have a car. I didn't have any kind of friends or support system here other than my boyfriend at the time. And I was starting my first business. That was when I started my first business in December of that year. So I was just home alone, working a lot and fairly isolated. And at first, in terms of friendships, it was just, again, like, okay, well, who does my boyfriend know, or who can I kind of meet through people that I'm meeting? And it was very, what would you say? It wasn't so intentional. It was just kind of like who's around. And I feel like that kind of characterizes my friendships up to that point. It was just a matter of like, who do I have access to? Friends of or people who went to my siblings' school, people who went to my university, in this case, friends of my boyfriend. And so there wasn't, maybe I didn't have enough time freedom or, independence in terms of driving around and going to different things, or maybe I just didn't know how to really make friendships yet at that point with people that I really related to or connected to in a deeper way. So this, though, was the season where it really started to change. I would say like 2013, 2014, in kind of that year after graduation is when I started to connect with some other people. So one friend, my closest friend, Amy, I met by chance through kind of that friend group. And I had no idea we would become so close, but over the years we really have. And she's still a dear, dear friend and lives close to me. And I'm very connected. Sunny and I both are very connected, her and her husband. So that was a huge blessing. And then I just started kind of putting myself out there. So this is where the intentionality piece started coming in. And I'll share a few of the things that I did that worked. I went on friend dates. So literally I wasn't using an app at the time. Those didn't really exist for that back then. So now there's, Bumble BFF and things like that. So that's kind of cool. But at the time I would just ask people like, who do you know that you think I should meet? Or I might meet someone in passing and then ask if they wanted to get together, go for a walk, go for a coffee. So I started to go on these kind of like friend dates. And just like with dating, I had to date a lot of people to find the people that I really connected with. The other thing that I started doing was pursuing more of my interests. So I was really interested in personal development. It's something I grew up around and it's always been a value of mine. And so I started to attend different kinds of events and workshops and retreats around the topic of personal development, personal growth. Some of you have heard this story. I shared it on a previous episode where I signed up for a personal development retreat. I believe it was the fall of 2013. And I had a strong intuition. I wanted to be there. I needed to be there. So I attended this retreat in Northern California. There was amazing women there. They were from all over California and different parts of the US, but unfortunately no one was there from San Diego. And so there came a point at the end of the retreat where we were given the opportunity to stand up and make an ask of the group, like share something that we wanted support with or resources, and then people could kind of come up to you and share if they had something for you. And so I stood up in front of, 40 women and I said, I've had such an amazing time this weekend. And I would love to meet people like this, like women like you, but I live in San Diego. Does anybody know anyone in San Diego you could connect me with? And I got connected to 3 different people. And I went on kind of blind friend dates with those 3 different people. And 2 of them I'm connected to this day. One of them a little less so, but she's still in my extended community and was a wonderful connection for some time. And then another one that's a very dear, dear friend. That really showed me something. The power of being bold, the power of making an ask. And again, the importance of doing things that you enjoy, like we always talk about on this podcast, following your aliveness, following your curiosity. So for me, that was around personal growth and people who valued that. So I did that, and I was bold, and I got up and asked, and then I followed through on those connections, and it led to some beautiful places. And in fact, the one that I'm not as connected with now, but she's still in my extended community, she ended up inviting me to an event that she was hosting with another young woman about my age. And I went and I attended. It was a little kind of day or weekend retreat type of thing. And that woman, the younger woman that I connected with through her, then started inviting me to different kinds of parties and gatherings that were being held in a different part of San Diego. It's called North County, San Diego. And so through this sort of grapevine, I started to meet really interesting people. I started to meet people that felt like, oh, like these could be really close friends. These are people that, have shared values and shared interests. And I met one other dear friend around that time through my sisters. They were in town, met him in passing. We went and had coffee and we talked for hours, and he became one of my closest friends and is still one of my closest friends to this day. So this all started to sort of snowball, and it was this really beautiful experience because you have to imagine I'm 25 years old at this point and have never had really close friends, never had people. I had connections, I had friendships, but never really had people that I was like, oh, they get me and I get them. And I have such a blast with them. And, they just accept me for who I am. And that started to happen. And interestingly enough, through these different avenues, the guy I met through my sisters, and then the parties and events I was going to, more people started to pop up. And then it started to sort of coalesce into this kind of closer knit group and then a larger community. And that is a version of the community that I'm a part of to this day. And there were some interruptions a little bit in that, which I'll talk about in a moment. But that was all, what is the year now? That was all 12 years ago. So it's been many, many years, and these are still some of my closest people in the world. I call them soul family, and such a huge, huge blessing in my life. So some of the things I did in that time, pursuing my interests again, being bold. And then the other thing I did was I started saying yes to everything for a while. And this was something that Gigi actually told me to do. I'll never forget it because I was very isolated, as mentioned, working all the time and just not really getting out there. And Gigi, I remember talking to her, my mom, and saying like, hey, I don't know what to do. And she said, why don't you just say yes to every invitation for a while and just try it? You'll end up at different things that you probably don't really want to be at or don't really feel like a fit, but it'll lead you some new experiences. And so I did that. And I think if you're in a season of really wanting to expand friendships and community, then you need to be willing to say yes to everything for a while. If you can, or at least a lot more than you are now, and just try things because you never know where you will meet someone. And speaking of kind of how all the threads come together, my dear friend Amy that I mentioned came through a totally different path. Years later, I invited her up to kind of a yoga gathering that was happening in North County. We were both living down in San Diego at the time. And at that gathering, she met her now husband, Peter. They've been together about 10 years. They have a little baby. And so just all these beautiful interweavings, right? Now she's deeply a part of this community and these friendships that I have in Northern San Diego. So many beautiful synchronicities and connections. Then in 2018, I got the internal intuitive call to leave San Diego. And Sunny and I decided to move to Austin, which is where I'm originally from. And so, we were basically starting over there. And after a few months, we started to meet some people. We thought, oh, these people feel like they have some shared values and we connect with them. And so we started to build what we thought was our new community there. And for about a year, it was a really fun, beautiful thing. We enjoyed connecting with them and started to grow. And we kept in touch with our friends in San Diego, but we were really in this place of wanting a fresh start. And then fast forward to COVID times, basically 2020, and some dynamics started to shift in those friendships. They started to feel very cliquey. There was kind of this feeling that there was like people were talking behind our backs and we were being left out of things, and it was uncomfortable. And so eventually in the fall of that year, we had a weekly girls' night we were doing with the girls in Austin. And I decided to bring it up. I decided to confront it head on and just say, hey, I so value our friendships and I so appreciate you all. And, I'd love to know if there's something going on so we could just really address that head on. And I proceeded to, there was a circle of girls, and with the exception of a couple of them, they all proceeded to go around and tell me everything they didn't like about me or didn't resonate with about me. And, little things, nothing huge, but little things that had, irritated them or upset them at some point that they just never even told me or brought up. So it really festered, and there was never the chance for repair. And it's hard to describe the experience, but it was basically all my worst fears come true, of being the outsider, of not fitting in, of not being liked, of, all of those things. And in a very visceral, real experience of this circle where they're all just sharing this with me. And there wasn't any room for repair or for, hey, maybe if you did this, we could, whatever. So by the end of that circle, I was hysterically crying. It was extremely challenging and traumatic, frankly. And, in the weeks that followed, I tried to follow up with people and understand more and see if there was any room to fix things, but they really didn't give any room to do that. And so I went through a really hard time. And this is something that's vulnerable to share about openly, but it's really important to me. It took me a long time before I did start sharing about it because I wanted to make sure I had healed from it and I was coming from a balanced place and not making anybody wrong. I never share who the people were, that's all far in the past and I've forgiven. But it was a really difficult experience. We were basically pushed out of that friend group, and I really started to see that there were a lot of just, again, cliquey dynamics and different things going on there. Now, I will say there were certain things they brought up that I was like, oh, okay, that's something I can work on. And I looked deeply into those things. So I took the learning opportunity and the self-reflection opportunity from that. And I'm very grateful for it all now. I'm actually very grateful for the whole experience now, but it was extremely difficult at the time. It was COVID too. So we're all basically at home, and I just went deep inside myself. And I would say I was pretty depressed for a while, and I couldn't really talk about the experience. I shared it with a couple of people, but I could barely talk about the experience without crying for a full year. It took a year before I started to feel like, okay, I can sort of navigate this a little bit more and talk about this. And so I share this because I decided about a year later to write a post on social media about it. Again, not naming any names and taking what I felt was a really balanced approach, but just sharing that I'd had this experience and how difficult it was, and that I wanted to bring these kinds of things to light because so many women go through it and we just don't talk about it. And I'm saying women, but I'm sure men have their own versions. I just happen to see it more often with women. And when I wrote this post, it struck a chord. I had hundreds of comments on it and women just sharing their own experiences, and it really touched on something for people. So I realized this is something I want to share openly about. And it's also a really big value of mine to not have people have those experiences. And inclusivity has always been a big value, and respect has always been a big value of my mom's and also myself. But it really cemented there that I was like, we need to treat each other better and, be more upfront with each other and create room for repair and, not have these sort of clique dynamics or gossip behind people's backs and things like that. And so that was really a big driver. I was already in my coaching business at the time, but it became an even bigger driver for me in what we do, and the kinds of groups and communities that we create. So in our programs, like our mastermind or online programs when we lead them, or retreats, we are very committed. My mom has always been very committed to fostering deeper connections with women and creating a safe space where people don't feel left out and where people are open with each other. And it's something that women comment on, when they come and work with us or they come to a retreat, is they're like, wow, just the level of connection and depth and acceptance is unlike anything I've experienced anywhere else. And that's a lot of the women in our mastermind too. Is one of the things they comment on or share with us the most, is like, it's so great to have a community like this where I can show up, where I can get real and get vulnerable about not just what's going on in business, but what's going on in my personal life. So I share that because it's become a really big value of mine, even more so than it was before. So the other aspect of this is that when I went through this, because it brought up some of my deepest insecurities and some of my biggest fears of being an outsider, of not fitting in, which I know is not just me. Many people have this fear or this kind of trigger. I had to really face into that. There was a time where I really didn't like myself for a while. I really kind of took on everything they said and sort of believed it and went deep into some dark places. But the amazing thing, and I, really credit the tools that I have access to and my mom's support and my family's support and Sunny's support and, I had lots of coaching and lots of support to navigate this, is that I ended up coming out the other side of that experience so strong in myself, with so much self-love. Interestingly enough, it's like I went to the depths of self-loathing and I went through it. And then on the other side, I came to just deep self-acceptance. Like, okay, I know myself. I know my flaws. I know, where I F up. And I also know my heart's in the right place. And I'm a great person, and the right people know that and see that. And I'm committed to finding those people. So with that, and with, that level of healing, eventually I did start to make some great friends in Austin. And then, we were there for another, I'd say 2 years or something like that. And then the call started to happen, the inner pull again, that it was time to leave and to make a transition. And we actually, interestingly enough, felt called to come back to San Diego, which I had not thought would happen. And we found our way back. And fortunately, those amazing friendships that we made here that felt like family, many of them were still here. Most of them were still here. And that community had grown and ebbed and flowed and shifted a bit. But we were welcomed back in with open arms. And it was like we'd never left. And now many of our friends are having kids and raising families of their own. And we just have this really rich experience here where there's no clickiness about it. It's very open. Other people kind of come in and out. We have, of course, kind of the core closer group, but there's just so much love, respect, showing up for each other. And as mentioned, it's one of the great joys of my life. So in all of this, I just want to share, I mostly told my story today, but I just want to share again a few of the things that I feel like have made the biggest difference and what I've learned about friendship and all of this, so that you can hopefully take a nugget or two if you are in the place of, maybe you have a couple of close friends, but you'd love more, or you're really struggling in the friendship department. Wherever you sit with that right now is, again, pursue your interests, follow your aliveness. That will really lead you to people that, this is true for dating too, people that are more aligned, right? Who share similar interests or curiosities. Maybe you have a season of saying yes to everything for a while, or saying yes to as many things as you can. Find people with shared values. This is really big. I realized shared interests is different than shared values. Our friends in Austin had a lot of shared interests. We appeared on the surface level to have shared values, but when we dug a little bit deeper, our true core values were quite different. And so that was something really important to me moving forward, was to really gauge if someone was going to be a close friend, do we share certain values in the way we feel about friendship and the way we feel about, people and respecting people or showing up for people. Like, you want to have people that align with you there as much as possible. And I believe in having a variety of different kinds of friendships too. I like to really have that core group. And then I love to get out and meet different kinds of people. So I'm not saying it all just needs to be this sort of one couple of close friends or this core group. You can have all kinds of people in your life, people who share different views and different values. I think that's really important and really great, because it challenges you, it stretches you. That's awesome. And in your close friendships, it's just an easier thing, I would say. There's more ease, there's more flow when you do have some shared values there. If there are cliquey dynamics, this is my personal belief now, or my personal stance, is I run the other direction, basically. And I'm saying that jokingly, but really, I'm not a stand for that. I'm not about that. If I start to feel that dynamic, I'm just like, this probably isn't really for me. Or I can be, loosely connected to people who have that, but it's just not really the dynamic that works for me. Another thing I've really learned over the years is to bring stuff up. So don't let things fester. If you start to feel like something's off, just bring it up with a friend. It's uncomfortable. It can be difficult, but I have one friend here in San Diego. I admire her so much about this. She just says the thing, if something's going on with one of our friends, she just approaches them and she's like, hey, what's going on with this? Let's talk about it. And she just goes for it. And there's something about that. She's not really charged about it, that it frees everybody up. It's like it brings it to light. So that's a really great one, is don't let things fester. Have the courage to bring them up, because it will lead to a deepening of the friendship. Whereas if it's the right friendship and meant to be, whereas if you don't, then things just build up over time and they're under the surface, and that just gets very gunky and weird. Another thing is that building great friendships and community takes time. And this is something that I think some people struggle with, because especially if you grew up in school and friends were just there, or you made friends through your work, and maybe you're in a season where you don't have that as easily accessible. Some people, I think, just think it should be easy and it should just be there, that friendship should just happen. But the truth is, it takes time. It takes investing time. It takes showing up for people as a friend you would want to have, deepening over time. You do want to put that effort in. It's not always going to be as effortless as maybe it was when you just had people around that you were seeing day to day. And there are also seasons in life. So I see this, I've seen it with myself, I've seen it with other clients, friends, family, that there may be times where you're a little less connected. And, it doesn't mean you have to stay that way. If you really want more friendships, then, you want to put the effort in, then that's great. But maybe there's times where that's not as high on your priority list. And those are great times to deepen in your relationship with yourself or your family, or, stay connected to those friends you've known a long time. And even if you talk on the phone once a week or something like that, you can set up regular connection points so you're not isolated, because isolation is one of the worst possible things for our health. If we isolate ourselves for too long, it's one of the biggest predictors of longevity is having connection and community. So I wouldn't say put it off for too long, but know that if you are in a season where that's just a lower priority or not possible, and you're really focused on something else, whether that's building your business, raising a family, then that's okay. Make peace with that if that's what you're choosing. And then just know that there can be another season that comes. And then the final thing I want to say is that the desire to be loved and accepted by others is, from what I can tell, a part of the human condition. It's built into us on, I've got to say, like a genetic level or something like that. It is something that is so intrinsic to what it is to be human, and not just human. I mean, many animals and creatures, right? That we want to be connected. We want to be in the sort of tribe, so to speak. And so really knowing that if you're feeling that way, you're not alone in that. And if you're feeling, again, isolated, or you feel like an outsider, you're not the only one that experiences that and goes through that. And even the people who appear to like have it all together and have all the friendships, everybody's got their insecurities. Everybody's got their stuff. So there's something to having that connection. Absolutely. And there's also something to the inner game, so to speak, to the really looking at where things come up for you and coming to a place of self-love and self-acceptance. And, the willingness to, even if you're not accepted by others, to love yourself anyway. And that is so much easier said than done. I know, I've been there, but it is something to keep in mind and to, take baby steps and get the support that you need, get therapy, get coaching, get whatever it is that supports you to really continue to foster that deeper and deeper level of self-love, self-acceptance, so that then the friendships add to that. They add richness to your life, but it's not like, it's not trying to fill something, a hole in yourself. It's really, again, adding to that. And it's the same thing for dating and relationships, right? As much as possible. It's not always going to be 100% possible, but we want to really love into ourselves, and then that person can come and add to the experience. So those are my words of wisdom, hard-earned wisdom for you today, or at least experience, and what I've seen has worked for me. So hopefully you took a nugget away, something you can apply, and we'd love to hear what that is. You can always write into us at support@wayofthemuse.com. If this was helpful for you, we'd love to hear that and hear from you. And if you have any questions, feel free to write those in as well, or any topics you want us to cover on a future episode. So I will see you very soon. Have a wonderful weekend and week, and I'll see you next time.
That's our episode for today, but let's not make it the end of our love story. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and think of some women in your life you'd love to share it with. And if you want to learn more about our events and programs, visit wayofthemuse.com. See you next time.